Hey, this is Dr. John Bush for the process. This is my lesson 133. I'm continuing with consistency of the median, so-called COM scores, consistency of median, COM, and using my statistical analysis to test uh, is there some predictability from year to year? In other words, can we use this for 2022? And again, please go back to the beginning of this whole lesson cycle 128, and you can catch the whole process as it's moving forward. It's kind of like baking a cake here. We're starting out and adding things, and we're kind of at this point now, and that's kind of how you build your knowledge base here. Okay, so trying to get you lessons or tools for your toolbox for 2022 here. And so let's continue. We have done quarterbacks and running backs. This is tight ends. And I'm going to jump right into it. I'm assuming you've kind of know what's going on because you've seen the other lessons. Okay. So what this table does is it looks at the last year's tight ends in terms of high, mid, and low COM or low consistency, and then how predictive is it for the next year. And I gather the data for the next year and put it into these graphs, and then I can compare these three populations, and you can probably see there are some interesting differences here, and we'll go from there and see how it all plays out for us. But again, the whole concept is we're building uh, treatments. If you think about it, we're doing statistical treatments here. I'm dividing the complete tight end population. I believe I started in 2014 to last year. And again, it's not one piece of data, it's multiple pieces of data. That's only where you have enough data samples to actually apply a statistical approach here. Okay. You probably are saying, well, I hadn't seen this on Twitter. Well, you're not going to see it on Twitter. Either if they have the kind of statistical approaches, they're hidden behind paywalls, or they're not even showing it, or they're not doing it. And we'll never know what. Nobody's going to admit to not knowing something, right? I mean, that's the whole point. You keep running a bluff, kind of like an old bullfrog bows up on a snake to keep the snake from eating him. Okay, I mean, nobody on Twitter can say, "Yeah, you caught me. I have no clue what the hell's going on." No, they're the fact that they're doing whatever they're doing is they're not backing down. So, and please go see my article on the expert problem we have in fantasy football here. Yeah, just spend 10 minutes on Twitter and you'll see it for all to view. But anyway, getting back to how a scientist approaches things, I am a biologist, by the way. I'm glad you've made it to the Science of Fantasy podcast and website where we talk and help you through using the scientific method. It's the only method I've done is a PhD in biology since the 1991. I got my PhD there. I got my BS and Masters before that. So I've been doing data analysis for many a year, and published papers, gotten grant money, trained graduate students, whatever. I got a track record. I know what I'm doing. Like I said, we can't tell the rest of these, people with funny names and swilling beer on the podcast or whatever the hell they're doing, smoking or whatever it is. I'm glad you're listening to me. The few that are, yay, thank you. Okay, that was enough of me cracking on all the tomfoolery that goes on Twitter. Next, so I've got these three populations. Last year high, last year mid, and that's 29 to 10% consistency, then below 10%, 9% or less. So I do something to look at the populations of these numbers called box and whisker. You can see the boxes there. I have a green box, blue box, red box, and that is high, mid, and low consistency last year, and this is what they've done this year. And then the whiskers are the little lines with the little T's above. And so the box represents about 66%, and the whiskers represent 99% of the data. So pretty much all the data. So statistical analysis, the first one is called the analysis of variance, Anova. And it looks at the populations and tries to look at the variation in the population and decides whether these populations are the same or they're actually different. Are pine trees and oak trees the same in, say, height? Are they different in this forest or this plot of land? No, got to get the data. But then you can use Anova to say, yeah, there's some differences, or no, there's not. So in statistics, it's always required you understand what is the level of possibility that everything is just random. What we're seeing is there appears to be differences, but it's really random. We're faked out. Okay. We in science make that at 5% or less. That is just a standard. Sometimes people will show you 10%, and that's P less than 0.1, but it's usually P less than 0.05, which is 5%, right? Anything below that is considered statistically significant, and the chances of any kind of random situation pretty much doesn't exist. And you're saying, what's an example? Well, if you skewed your sample and looked only at jockeys or basketball players and looked at height and you try to compare it to the population, you're going to get all sorts of wackiness because it's not real. You have skewed the data. Okay, it's not a random sample. It's not a random distribution. It's not a normalized distribution at all. So you don't do, that's not how you do things. You might look within jockeys, right? Or within basketball players and do some stuff, but not try to, compare them. But again, we're looking in the populations. Are they different? Are they the same? And you can pretty much see just in a visual way of the box and whisker that they're going to be at least the high from last year's, and turns out this year there's a lot of consistency continuing, and that's different from the other groups there. So Anova then, descriptive stats here. Here's our treatment, which this is called K, equal 3 independent treatments. So it's got to be independent. We can't cherry pick the data. So it was high last year, and what are they this year? Medium last year or low. And so if you look at the mean of the COM-score, and it's not in percent, but you can just multiply by hundreds percent. So it'd be 35% that were high last year versus mid last year in consistency were 20% and low were 12. 35, 20, and 13. Wow, big difference in the averages. So that means if you're probably hanging in here, you're going to be picking good tight ends that are going to continue giving you a consistency in fantasy points, which is the whole purpose of us hunting here. We're trying to find the best place to dig for our fantasy gold here. And so that looks pretty suspicious, but we've got to finish it off by applying the Anova and getting a p-value, which is 1.1 times 10 to the minus 16. But 16 zeros. So that's almost no chance at all. What we just showed you, the averages, the means were different by, it's not, it's random. No, it's very different based on the treatments. And that's great news for us. That means it can be used in predictions for next year, which is the whole point. The only thing about Anova, and we had the high, the mid, and the low, and you can compare. The Anova just says there's one difference in that group. So high to mid, high to low, mid to low. So it's three different comparisons. Anova doesn't tell you anything more. There's at least one difference. Could be all of them are different, but at least one. So we have to do another test. And in this case, it's the Tukey's highest significant difference test. And we get a p-value here. And if it's in green, that means it's not random. The differences are real based on the actual treatments. So high versus mid last year are completely different this year, as well as high to low. And mid to low is different as well. So now we can group tight ends based on their last year. And again, this is groups now. This is not individuals. Okay, we're just looking at big groups and trying to make some conclusions and some deeper thoughts here. Here is the tight end players from the highest comp scores consisting in 2020 versus their 2021 tiers, and I use the color. Green is high, blue is mid, and red is low, and the white means they got injured, didn't play. So if you remember the RBs, they were really good, like 9 out of 12. This case, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 13. Is that right? No, 14. So we're talking 9 out of 14, a little bit less, that were high in 2020 were high in 2021. The good news is a bunch of them, only two were complete failures, Hayden Hurst and Jimmy Graham. They were high in 2020. They were a failure. So there was a bust here of 2 out of 14. So, there's going to be some bust. And it looks like it's a little higher than in running backs, actually, which is kind of surprising. Anyway, so I've tried it before, and there is some utility to it, but just realize it's not nothing. Nothing is perfect. If it was perfect, people would be at Vegas and living the big life here. So, it's probabilities and odds and whatnot. So this is then players group based on what they did on their consistency levels in 2021 last year. And you see the players that were high, medium, and low. A lot of low players, which is, a lot of teams will have some of these. I think the take home is finding some of these high players that maybe were further down the list here. I think somebody like Fant and Thomas, Max Williams, I don't know if he's playing, Schultz, Rob Gronkowski, if they come back, they're they're probably worth a draft here. Certainly Kelsey, Kittle, Andrews are the top three. Hawkinson's in that top four range. Of course, Pitts, we didn't really have anything to compare him to, so I can't make up numbers for you. But I would suspect, uh, you know, he's going to be pretty good. Uh, Last year he was a mid, but the first year out, knowing some of the statistical knowledge about experience levels and production, it shows there's a big jump in tight ends from year 1 to 2 and 3. So one would project that he would jump up in the high, but the data as it sits is that. So I can't make the data, something it's not. This is the data. You have to live with it. It is what it is. So nothing's perfect, but at least it might give you an idea, especially some of the tight end 2s and 3s that you might need in deeper leagues or tight end premium leagues. It might kind of help you think about some plays here. So, but I think there's some players here that might be a little bit of a surprise to you. And if so, then they may be a deeper target if you go later tight ends. At least I think that's the concept there. Okay, that is finishing up my lesson, at least at this point on tight end. I'm gonna go one level down coming, but not right now, but it's coming. And here this date is. We'll leave it right here. We've got a way to have some predictability for 2022 based on stats. Woo woo. Okay, Dr. Bush for the process. Thanks for listening. Come back.